When an 18-year-old homeless boy saw the Hells Angels clubhouse erupt into a wall of fire, he didn't wait for the fire trucks. While the neighborhood watched from a distance, Leo ran straight into the black smoke to drag a 250 lb biker to safety. He saved a life, then disappeared back into the shadows of his cardboard box. But the Hells Angels don't leave debts unpaid. What happened when 50 bikers tracked him down to the street corner will restore your faith in the unspoken code. Before we reveal the life-changing surprise the club had waiting for Leo, I want to ask you, what would you do if you lost everything and a stranger risked their life for you? Tell us your thoughts in the comments and let us know where in the world you are watching from today. If you love stories about unexpected heroes and the brotherhood of the road, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, let's go to a cold November night. In the heart of the city, Leo was a ghost in his own city, a shadow that lived in the margins of a world that had forgotten him. At 18, his bed was a collection of flattened cardboard boxes, tucked behind an alleyway dumpster 3 blocks away from the heavy steel doors of the Hells Angels local headquarters. Most people walked past Leo without a glance, treating him like part of the urban landscape. But Leo watched everyone. He knew the rhythm of the club, the low, guttural rumble of the bikes at dusk that felt like a heartbeat, the boisterous laughter echoing from the roof during summer BBQs, and the steady protective presence of the leather men who patrolled the block. He didn't fear them. Strangely, their presence kept the vultures of the street away from his alley. Leo had aged out of the foster care system the day he turned 18, handed a plastic bag of his belongings and was shown the door. With no family and no safety net, he had landed on the pavement hard, but he had a survivalist heart and eyes that saw everything. He survived on discarded sandwiches and the warmth of a nearby laundromat's dryer vent, keeping his head down and his spirit tucked away where the world couldn't bruise it further. But at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the rhythm of the city changed from a low hum to a violent roar. Leo woke to the smell of chemical lace and wood smoke. It wasn't the smell of a trash fire. It was the smell of history burning. He peeked out from his tattered blankets to see orange light dancing off the brick walls of the alley, turning the night into an eerie, flickering day. The air was thick with the sound of breaking glass and the terrifying hungry roar of flames. The clubhouse was an inferno. An electrical short in the basement combined with the vintage wood of the 100-year-old building had turned the headquarters into a furnace in minutes. As Leo stood there shivering in his thin, oversized hoodie, he saw the brothers spilling out of the back exit. They were covered in soot, coughing violently, their eyes red and streaming. They were counting heads, shouting names over the roar of the fire. They were tough men, men who had seen war and prison. But tonight, they looked small against the towering flames. But then, through the chaos, Leo heard it. A muffled, desperate shout from deep inside the basement level. The main staircase had already collapsed into a heap of burning timber, cutting off the primary exit. The bikers were frantic, grabbing garden hoses and fire extinguishers, trying to find a way back in, but the heat near the entrance was white hot, melting the plastic off the nearby trash bins. Leo knew that building. He knew it better than some of the members. He had spent months observing every crack and crevice while searching for warmth. He knew a small service hatch in the back alley, a coal chute from the 1920s that was barely 2 feet wide. It led directly into the basement bar area. Without thinking about the danger, without weighing the cost of his own life, Leo grabbed his tattered, damp t-shirt and tied it over his face. He didn't look at the bikers. He just ran. He dove into the narrow, soot-filled crawl space. The metal of the chute burned his palms, but he pushed through. Inside, the heat was a physical wall that threatened to collapse his lungs. The smoke was a living thing, black and oily, swirling in the air like a demon. Through the haze, he saw Big Mike, the club's sergeant at arms, pinned under a massive fallen oak beam. Near the basement bar, Mike was a giant, of a man, usually immovable, but now he was semi-conscious, his lungs filling with toxic fumes, his massive tattooed arms straining fruitlessly against the weight of the debris. Leo was barely 120 lb, but in that moment, he possessed the adrenaline-fueled strength of a man with nothing to lose. He found a discarded metal pipe and jammed it under the beam. Using it as a lever, he grunted, his muscles screaming, throwing his entire body weight into prying the beam just high enough. Move, he tried to yell, but his voice was swallowed by the fire. Mike managed to slide his trapped legs out, gasping for air that wasn't there. With the roof groaning and sparks showering down like lethal rain, Leo grabbed the giant by the collar of his leather vest. He dug his heels into the scorched floor and pulled. He dragged Big Mike inch by agonizing inch toward the small service exit. The smoke was so thick they were both crawling blind, guided only by the distant panicked shouts of the brothers in the alleyway. When they finally tumbled out into the cold night air, the transition from the furnace to the freezing November wind felt like a physical blow. Leo coughed until he vomited, his lungs feeling like they were filled with crushed glass. He saw the bikers rushing toward them, their faces masked in disbelief. In that moment, the panic of his reality kicked in. He was 18, homeless, and terrified of being processed by the police or caught up in an investigation. He didn't want to be a hero. He just wanted to be invisible again. Before the first fire engine even turned the corner, Leo slipped back into the shadows of the textile mill, disappearing into the darkness of the city he knew so well. The next morning, the Hells Angels stood in a somber circle in front of the charred remains of their sanctuary. The clubhouse was a skeleton of blackened brick, but Big Mike was alive. He sat on the bumper of a truck, an oxygen mask hanging around his neck, staring at the small soot-stained service hatch in the alley. It wasn't a kid, Mike Ross too. Jax, the chapter president, his voice sounding like sandpaper. It was a young man, a ghost in a blue hoodie. He pulled me out when the fire was licking my boots. I looked into his eyes and then he was gone. Jax looked at the mud and soot-covered footprints leading away from the alley and toward the dumpster. He saw a scrap of blue fabric caught on a nail. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just about a fire anymore. This was about a debt. In their world, a life saved was a debt that could never be repaid, only honored. No one saves a Hell's Angel and stays a stranger, Jack said, his voice low and vibrating with a terrifying kind of purpose. Find him. I don't care if you have to flip every brick in this city. Find that man. For the next 3 days, the city witnessed a phenomenon it had never seen before. It wasn't a policeman hut. It was a biker search party. They didn't check the hotels or the high schools. They went where the forgotten people go. They checked the soup kitchens, the abandoned subway tunnels, the underpasses, and the shipping docks where the cold wind bit the hardest. They didn't lead with threats. They walked into the darkest corners of the city, showing a photo they had grabbed from a nearby security camera. A blurry image of an 18-year-old boy in a blue hoodie. They spoke to the invisible people of the city, the homeless, the runaways, the broken. We're looking for Leo, they would say, handing out thick sandwiches and warm coffee. He's a hero to us. Tell us where he sleeps. The word spread like wildfire through the streets. The Hells Angels weren't looking for trouble. They were looking for a savior. Finally, a local street vendor pointed toward the alleyway behind the old textile mill. He's scared, she told Jax. He thinks you're going to blame him for the fire. He sleeps in a fridge box back there. Please don't hurt him. Jax looked at her and softened his expression for a fleeting second. Ma'am, he's the safest man in this city. On Friday afternoon, Leo was sitting on his cardboard pallet, shivering. The smoke had left him with a lingering cough, and he was trying to repair a gaping hole in his shoe with a strip of silver duct tape. He heard a sound that made his stomach drop. It wasn't the sound of a single bike. It was a synchronized rhythmic thunder that made the ground beneath his cardboard box vibrate. Leo froze. He thought the police had finally tracked him down. He thought the bikers were there to punish him for being near their building when it burned. He curled into a ball, hoping the shadows would swallow him. But the thunder didn't pass. It grew louder, echoing off the narrow brick walls of the dead-end alley until the air itself felt heavy. 50 Hell's Angels rolled into the alley 2 by 2 in a perfect military-style procession. Their chrome gleamed like polished silver under the gray sky. They circled him, the roar of the engines filling the alley until Leo couldn't even hear his own heartbeat. Then, as if on a silent command, all 50 engines died at the same time. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Jack stepped off his bike first. Beside him was Big Mike, still bandaged, his face scarred by the heat, but his eyes bright. The 50 bikers formed 2 long disciplined lines, creating a literal path of honor that led from the street straight to Leo's meager cardboard home. Leo, Jack said. His voice wasn't a shout, but it filled the alleyway. Leo stood up slowly, his legs shaking. He was 18, but he felt like he was 6 years old again, lost and small. I didn't do anything, he whispered, his voice cracking. I tried to save him. I promise I didn't steal anything. Big Mike stepped forward, looking down at the young man who barely reached his chest. He looked at the duct-taped shoes and the thin hoodie. Without a word, the 250-lb giant dropped to one knee in the dirt of the alley, putting himself at eye level with the boy. You didn't do anything wrong, Leo, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. You did everything right. You saved my life when my own brothers couldn't reach me. And while I was in a hospital bed getting fixed up, you were out here in the cold. Jack stepped forward carrying a heavy, high-quality leather jacket. On the back, in beautiful gold embroidery, were the words, Lionheart Heart. The world treats you like you're invisible, Leo. Jack said, people walk past you like you're a ghost, but the Hell's Angels have very good eyesight, and we never ever forget a man who stands by us. He draped the heavy jacket over Leo's shoulders. From this moment on, you don't sleep behind a dumpster. Jax continued, you don't wonder where your next meal is coming from, and you sure as hell don't walk these streets alone. If anyone so much as looks at you wrong, they answered to 50 of us. Leo looked at the line of men the world feared, but who were looking at him with nothing but respect. Where am I going? He asked, a single tear cutting a clean path through the soot on his cheek. Home, Jack said. We bought the old Victorian house next to the new clubhouse site. It's got a kitchen with a full fridge and a yard. It's in your name, Leo. It's your fortress. The 18-year-old burst into tears, the weight of years of loneliness finally breaking. But as he sobbed, he didn't hit the ground. He was caught by 50 pairs of arms. But as Jax led Leo toward the waiting trucks, he looked back at the charred clubhouse. He knew the fire hadn't been an accident. It had been an act of war by a rival gang. And now they knew about the boy. The war was coming, and Leo was right in the center of the crosshairs. The transition from a cardboard box behind a rusty dumpster to the sprawling Victorian house on the corner of 5th and Main felt like a dream Leo was terrified to wake up from. For the first week, he didn't even sleep in the massive oak bed. He slept on the floor beside it, his body so accustomed to hard, cold surfaces that a mattress felt like sinking into a swamp. He spent hours just staring at the refrigerator, which was stocked with more fresh food than he had seen in the last 3 years combined. But the Hells Angels didn't just give him a key and walk away. They didn't treat him like a charity case or a PR stunt. They treated him like a brother who had been away at war. Every morning at 7 a.m., the quiet of the suburban neighborhood was gently broken by the rhythmic, low-frequency rumble of a single bike. Big Mike would roll up, his face still bearing the red, angry marks of the fire with a bag of hot breakfast burritos or fresh pastries, hanging from his handlebars to check on the young man who had pulled him from the furnace. "Eat up, Lionhay Hart," Mike would say, his voice still bearing the raspy, growly edge of permanent smoke. "Damage. You're too thin for that 18-year-old frame. We can't have the neighborhood thinking we don't feed our own. Plus, we're heading to the gym later. If you're going to walk with us, you need to be able to carry your own weight and stand your own ground." These moments were the first time in Leo's life that a man had looked at him with something other than pity, irritation, or judgment. He was being mentored by the very men the rest of society spent their lives fearing. They taught him how to cook, how to change the oil in a vehicle, and how to look a man in the eye when he spoke. But as Leo began to heal, the atmosphere in the city's underworld began to sour like milk in the sun. The fire that had destroyed the Hells Angels Clubhouse wasn't an electrical malfunction or an act of God. It was a cold, calculated act of war. A rival gang known as the Iron Skulls had been trying to move into the northern territory for months. They wanted the drug trade, they wanted the shipping docks, and they wanted the Hells Angels' historical influence eradicated. When they realized their message had failed to kill the club's sergeant at arms, and that an 18-year-old nobody from the streets had been the reason for their failure, they shifted their focus to the Iron Skulls. Leo wasn't a hero. He was a witness, a loose end, and a humiliating symbol of the Hells Angels' renewed strength. They began to stalk the perimeter of Leo's new life. It started with subtle, chilling signs. A blacked-out SUV idling at the end of the block at 2 a.m. The same car appearing in the rear-view mirror every time the club's support vehicles moved. Leo, with the heightened animal-like senses of someone who had survived years on the pavement, noticed the shadows before the club did. He didn't have a phone yet. He was still learning to trust the permanence of his new life. So, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He went to the new clubhouse construction site. Jax was hunched over blueprints in a makeshift trailer when Leo walked in, his face pale, but his jaw set in a line of iron. "There." Watching the house, Leo said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "A black Suburban with tinted windows and no plates. 3 guys inside. They've been there for 2 nights. They aren't cops, Jax. Cops don't hide the way these guys do. They're predators." Jax didn't move for a long moment. He slowly set down his pen and looked at Big Mike, who was standing in the corner cleaning his glasses. The air in the trailer turned cold enough to see your breath. "It's starting," Jack said quietly. He turned back to Leo and placed a heavy tattooed hand on the young man's shoulder. "You did the right thing coming here. You've got the instincts of an outlaw, Leo. You see the things most people ignore. From now on, you don't stay in that house alone. We're moving a security detail in tonight. If they want to watch the house, we'll give them something worth looking at." That night, Fells Angels moved into the Victorian house with Leo. They didn't treat him like a guest. They treated him like a soldier in a foxhole. During the long night watches, sitting on the porch as the city hummed in the distance, they taught him the code. They taught him how to spot a tail in heavy traffic, how to secure a perimeter without looking suspicious, and most importantly, how to stay calm when the world was trying to rattle your cage. They told him stories of the club's history, of the wars they had fought in the 70s, and the brothers they had lost to the road. For the first time in 18 years, Leo felt like he wasn't just a boy in a box. He belonged to a lineage of survivors. But the Iron Skulls were cowards who specialized in soft targets and psychological terror. They knew they couldn't take the Hells Angels head on in a fair fight. So, they decided to strike at the club's most visible victory, the boy who had become their heart. 2 days later, while Leo was walking to the local grocery store, a simple 3B block errand he insisted on doing to maintain some sense of independence, a white delivery van pulled up alongside him. Before he could even reach for the heavy tactical pocket K-knife Mike had given him. The side door slid open with a violent snap. 3 men in tactical masks lunged out. Leo fought like a cornered wolf, breaking the nose of the first man with a well-placed elbow and kicking the second square in the chest. But a heavy blow from a lead pipe to the back of his head sent the world into a spinning darkness. They threw a heavy canvas hood over his head and shoved him into the back of the van, disappearing into the city traffic before the first witness could even process what they had seen. When the hood was finally pulled off, Leo found himself in a derelict rusting warehouse down by the salt-crusted docks. The air smelled of dead fish, diesel, and old blood. Tied to a rusted metal chair in the center of a vast empty concrete floor, he looked up to see Victor, the leader of the Iron Skulls. Victor was a man who dressed in $5,000 silk suits, but carried the aura of a vulture circling a carcass. He paced around Leo in slow, deliberate circles, clicking a switchblade open and shut. "So, you're the little street rat who ruined my beautiful fire," Victor sneered, leaning in so close Leo could smell the expensive tobacco and mint on his breath. "The Hell's Angels think you're a hero. They think they found a new mascot to make them look like community servants. I think you're just a mistake that needs to be erased from the record. We're going to use you to lure Jax and his boys into a killing zone. And once they're dead, we'll see if you can breathe in the harbor water as well as you can breathe in smoke." Victor forced a camera into Leo's face, his hand gripping Leo's hair, demanding he record a video, a desperate plea for Jax to come to the docks alone to save him. But Victor didn't realize that Leo had spent months watching the bikers communicate in loud bars and busy streets. As Leo spoke into the camera, his voice shaking with feigned, high-pitched terror, his fingers were moving in a specific rhythmic pattern against the rusted arm of the chair. He was using a tactical sign language that the brothers had taught him during their late-night watches on the porch. He was telling them it was an ambush. He was telling them there were 4 snipers in the rafters. He was telling them they were at Pier 14, the old canning factory. When Jax saw the video back at the temporary clubhouse, the atmosphere didn't just turn angry, it turned lethal. The roar of 100 engines outside was already starting to shake the windows before Jax even finished the clip. Big Mike looked like a force of nature, his scarred face twisted in a mask of pure unadulterated fury. "He's at the old canary," Mike growled, his fingers stabbing at Leo's hands on the screen. "Look at his fingers, Jax. He's calling out the sniper positions. He's telling us Victor has the north exit rigged with explosives. The kid isn't pleading for his life. He's giving us a mission briefing." Jax stood up, his leather vest creaking as he tightened his gloves. "Victor thinks he's playing a game of leverage. He doesn't realize he just signed his own death warrant and invited us to the funeral. Call the Oakland and San Jose chapters. I want a 100 bikes at the docks in 15 minutes. No lights, no sirens. We're going to be the silent shadow before the lightning strikes." Back at the warehouse, Victor was losing his patience. The unnatural silence of the docks was starting to get under his skin. "Where are they, Leo? Your family seems to be taking their time. Maybe they decided an 18-year-old stray wasn't worth the risk of a war. Maybe you're just a dog they decided not to whistle for." Leo looked up at Victor, a bloody, defiant smile stretching across his face. "They aren't my family," Leo rasped, spitting blood onto Victor's expensive shoes. "They're a storm. And you're just standing in the middle of a flat field holding a 20-foot lightning rod. Can you hear it? The ground is already shaking." The words had barely left his mouth when the floorboards began to vibrate. It wasn't the sound of a few bikes. It was a low-frequency hum that made the warehouse's corrugated metal walls rattle in their frames like they were about to explode. It was the sound of a 100 heavy-duty engines approaching from every single cardinal direction. The Iron Skull snipers on the roof didn't even have time to adjust. Their scopes before they were neutralized by the Hells Angels. Advanced scout team moving silently through the shadows. The warehouse doors didn't just open, they were obliterated, as a heavy-duty armored truck smashed through the front gate, sending sparks flying. Following the truck were 100 bikers, their high beam headlights cutting through the darkness like white-hot laser beams. They didn't come in shouting, they came in with the terrifying cold discipline of a professional army. Big Mike was the first one off his bike, his silhouette framed by the blinding glare of the lights. The confrontation was short, brutal, and utterly one-sided. The Iron Skulls, realizing they were outmatched by a factor of 10, tried to scatter into the darkness, but there was nowhere left to go. Victor, in a final act of cowardice, grabbed Leo and held a jagged knife to his throat. "Back off," Victor screamed, his voice reaching a hysterical high pitch. "I'll kill him. I swear I'll kill him right now." Jax walked forward, his hands empty and open, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. "Go ahead, Victor. Kill him. But know this, if you so much as scratch his skin, there isn't a hole deep enough or a city far enough in this world to hide you from what comes next. We won't just kill you. We'll erase your name, your history, and everything you ever cared about. You'll be a ghost before you hit the floor." Leo didn't wait for Jax to save him. He remembered the lessons from the house. That strength isn't about size, but about the will to act. He threw his head back with everything he had, smashing his skull into Victor's nose with a sickening wet crunch. As the gangster recoiled, howling in pain, Leo twisted in the chair, biting down on Victor's knife hand with the ferocity of a wolf. The knife clattered to the concrete, and in the next heartbeat, Big Mike's fist connected with Victor's jaw. The sound was like a wooden bat hitting a wet leather bag. Victor hit the concrete and didn't move again. Jax walked over to Leo and cut his zip ties with a steady hand. He didn't offer a hug. He offered a hand up, pulling Leo to his feet. He looked Leo in the eye and saw that the homeless boy was gone. In his place stood a man who had stared into the heart of the darkness and didn't blink. "You held the line, Lionheart Heart," Jack said, his voice thick with a respect that few men ever earned from him. "You sent the signal. You saved the club's life tonight." The aftermath was a massive turning point for the city. The Hells Angels didn't hide what had happened in the shadows. They rode in a massive procession, a 100 bikes strong, straight to the city's central plaza, with Leo riding pillion on Jax's lead bike. In front of the news cameras and the gathered crowds, Jax made it clear Leo was under the protection of the Death's Head. The Iron Skulls were dismantled within 48 hours. Their members fleeing the state to avoid the club's wrath. Leo didn't become a biker in the traditional sense. He didn't want the life of crime or the constant chaos. But he never left the family. He stayed in the Victorian house which the club helped him renovate into a beautiful sanctuary. They paid for his college tuition and Leo went on to become a high-level social worker specializing in at-risk youth. He became the man who looked for the kids behind the dumpsters, the ones the rest of the world walked past without a second thought. Years later, the new Hells Angels clubhouse was rebuilt on the same spot as the old one. But this time, there was a heavy bronze plaque by the front door. It didn't have a list of names. It just had a gold lion's head and the inscription for the one who ran back into the fire when the world ran away. Every year on the anniversary of the fire, the club hosts a massive banquet. Leo is always the guest of honor, sitting at the head of the table between Jack and Big Mike. A living reminder that family isn't about the blood in your veins. It's about who is standing next to you when the smoke gets too thick to breathe. Leo found a home, but the Hells Angels found something even more valuable. They found their soul. This story is a powerful reminder that a hero can be anyone. They can be the person you ignore on the street corner or the one sleeping in a cardboard box. All they need is a reason to fight and a family to back them up. What would you do if you were Leo? Would you have stayed in the shadows or would you have run into the flames? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one of them. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and help us share these stories of the human spirit at Embrace the Journey. We believe everyone has a lion heart inside them just waiting for the call. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next story of